this ARK seminar. We're just a few minutes behind schedule, but that's because we've had tremendous response to the seminar. In fact, people are still arriving, so we're very pleased to see so many of you with an interest in the topic of this particular seminar, and such a wide range of people from a range of different backgrounds. Just to take a moment or two to say a little bit about ARK. ARK is Northern Ireland Social and Political Archive. It's a joint initiative of Queen's University Belfast and the University of Ulster, and its mission is to try to open up access to social and political data on Northern Ireland to as wide an audience as possible. And that's why we're particularly delighted to see a wide spread of people attend this seminar, as has happened at previous seminars and other events. The seminar series was set up to try to broaden out some of the academic debates that have been happening around social and political data. And the series has focused on a whole range of different topics. Today's topic is about one particular section within the ARK resource, which is the Qualitative archive. Many of you will know that it has been a tradition that we preserve and record and archive quantitative material, that is numeric and statistical material, but it hasn't been so easy or so common to sort of archive and store more qualitative material. Could be interviews, films, and so on and so forth. So within ARK, a few years ago, my colleagues, who will talk to you later, made a proposal to the SRC to try to get some funding to begin a qualitative archive to record data on the Northern Ireland conflict. And today's seminar is to tell you a bit about that particular project, the work that's gone on so far, the materials that we've been able to find and list and make available to you. And the project has been funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, and we're very grateful to them for their support of this project, which I think you will agree forms a valuable part of the reservoir of materials relating to Northern Ireland and in particular to the conflict. So without any further ado, I'll introduce my colleagues who will take you through the seminar. The format is that they will speak for 20 to 30 minutes. That will be followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions, pass comment, make your own observations, and then following that we have a light lunch served outside in the foyer, which you're welcome to join us for. And again, you can follow up the conversations and pick up any points with either the speakers or the other members of the ARK team or other colleagues who are here. So the Principal Investigator and Deputy Director of ARK is Professor Robert Miller from Queen's University. He's got sociology, social policy and social work, I think. I always get the title mixed up, it's a long school title. With him is Dr. Peter McLoughlin, who was the first research associate working on the project, who has just recently moved to take up a new postgraduate studies at the School of Politics in UCD. And on Peter's right is Dr. Mark McNally, who's been working with Bob to finish off this particular phase of the project, if you like. So we look forward to hearing more about the archive and the work that you've been doing, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Gillian. I'm going to give the presentation today, but then really my colleagues Peter and Mark will sort of be handling questions. And I'd like to say before I start that really that they were the ones that have done the day-to-day work on the catalog and has put the material together, and have been very were really instrumental in sort of maintaining the goodwill that ARK has to help us, I think, bring this to I believe it's a successful conclusion. And I was quite lucky that Peter worked very well on the project up through the almost basically through the first bit over the first year. But then when he was able to have an offer of a post at the UCD and had to leave, we were very lucky to have Mark come in and take over from him, and we had a very smooth transition. It helped that Peter and Mark both knew each other beforehand, so that they had a good relationship. So as friends, I think that so that there was to sort of keep a continuity. Now, to talk about, explain, maybe to begin, explain exactly what we've produced, because I know I've we had a press release yesterday, and then I've been sort of various people in the media who contacted us, and they assumed a bit more than what we have produced. What we have produced is an online catalog of material that is of potential relevance to qualitative researchers. So it is basically an index of what's out there and what's available. We don't actually have the material itself. It is an archive, but it's a catalog. It's not the actual sort of physical maintenance of the material. That is, by and large, held with the original investigators or the person that has put the material together. And what we have is a way that you can get in contact with them if you want to have direct access. We're an archive, but not in the sense of being a physical archive in this case. Where this, I think the origins of this really comes from, I think, a perception of myself and other people at ARK that over the long span of the Northern Ireland conflict, that a vast body of material has been generated of various types that could be of interest to qualitative researchers. There have been a number of qualitative researchers that have come to Northern Ireland over the years, or have been resident here, who have carried out interviews, or collected observation notes, or various sorts of material. And as well, there've been visitors, some of them, in particularly sort of in the early days, there was a lot of joke about academic tourists who would come in for a couple of weeks and go off and write definitive studies on Northern Ireland, which is, but this material is being generated. And then at the same time also there are just people out there who have accumulated collections of material for various personal reasons. Many of these are not academics at all, but they have brought together what is really rich data, perhaps without not realizing it. And then, of course, there are all the archives, the BBC, UTV, the Linden Hall Library, and the many other sort of sources of material. And one thing you note is that this material, everyone or many people in academia would know about various interesting studies. But if you talk to different people, you realize that different people knew about different studies, and there really was no sort of centralized, comprehensive record of what was being held. And also, as time went by, you realize that a lot of this material was in danger of being lost. Some of the original researchers perhaps just literally had sort of notes stuck in cupboards. Some people had passed on, were no longer with us. And then also physically, a lot of the material was in danger, perhaps, of being lost. It was in media that would degenerate over time. And so there was a feeling that said, there was a danger of material being lost. And perhaps the third reason that sort of brought us an idea of moving on was that really ARK has, if you look at the span of ARK's activities, at one end you have the Kane website that's sort of almost sort of like a vast sort of attic of the Northern Ireland conflict material of many different types. And at the other end you have the surveys that are carried out, and then also our sort of links into through the surveys online and through the link into the Northern Ireland Household Panel Survey, links into other surveys. So we had sort of a gap between sort of the quantitative research and the more sort of material about Northern Ireland, of a gap in qualitative material. And partially this has been filled by a qualitative site to do with ageism, where through Atlantic Philanthropy's funding we were able to sort of work on qualitative material to do with the interviews with elderly people. But also this particular catalog is a way maybe to help sort of round out expand ARK's qualitative role and sort of round out what we produce. And it comes, as Gillian mentioned, out of the ESRC. The ESRC has something called the Qualitative Demonstrator Scheme, or QUADS for short, where they funded 5 projects, all to do with making qualitative material available for secondary analysis. The other 4 are located in Britain, and a couple of them are quite technical, and others are sort of to do with particular sorts of qualitative material. But the theme to all of them is the idea that the difficulties that people have about approaching qualitative data that's been collected by other researchers and reanalyzing it or reusing it. So we fit with that logic of a different sort. The catalog makes material, lets people locate material that is potentially available for qualitative analysis. Then we have sort of 2 goals in this project. The primary goal was the catalog itself, was to collate as extensively as possible information about qualitative material. I don't like to use the word data, I don't like to use the word sort of text, because it could be all sorts of material that is relevant to the 35-year span of the Troubles. Both its content, its availability, what sort of format it's being held in, and a variety of information, all together to a single catalog, and following the sort of ARK philosophy, an online catalog that's searchable. And then a secondary goal that also was quite important was really, if we found material that was at risk of being lost, to, if possible, to take steps to help preserve it, probably through digitizing it, copying it, or reproducing it in some way. And we've had one particular archive to do with that called the Heathwood collection, which is a very extensive collection of news programs from 1980 up to the present, which have been collected by the private individual, and that was a big special part of the grant. So that's the goal of the material. To talk about the kind of material that's in the archive, I think you could say we really have sort of two main types. A lot of it is academic material that was generated by social science researchers, mainly interview notes, transcripts of interviews, but also audio material, but also other types, observation notes, there's film, and there's video holdings that academic researchers have had. Here you could say really what we're doing is secondary analysis. The material has been collected, analyzed, and probably published by the original primary researchers, but it still exists, and there's a possibility that someone can return and subject it to a different sort of analysis or use it. And then also, quite a lot of interest is that I've just called it lay material. It's really material that has been collected or accumulated by non-academics, but of some sort of rich nature, potential for analysis. And I think there are two sort of main subtypes. I would get sort of institutional material, things that have been accumulated by large institutions such as the BBC, UTV, the Leonard Hall Library, and others into their own, often cataloged, sometimes, quite often, well-indexed collections internal to themselves. And then perhaps certainly the most, in some ways, the most intrinsically interesting part, the accumulations. There are private individuals out there, for one reason or another, who have brought together a large private collections. And this is sometimes the most, I think in some ways this might be the part of the catalog that was the hardest to get information on, but also perhaps the one that might pose the most fruit for many qualitative researchers, because some of this would be things that people have maybe never heard of before, or weren't being aware. Perhaps at the question period, my colleagues can sort of fill us in on some of the more interesting of these sort of unique collections that have come out. So, I'd like to say a little bit about the sort of strategy we followed to generate the archive. We decided initially that the first focus would be on the academic material for a number of reasons. One is that since we were coming out of the academic sphere ourselves, we had a good idea of certainly who were known as the key social science qualitative researchers, and also some of the famous studies that have taken place over the years. So we had a good starting point. And then when you're going to accumulate it, as well as just what we knew ourselves and the sort of workings we could make up, that you could really take, I think most people here are probably academics or work in the sort of academic related spheres, that you can use the sort of way that you would accumulate a bibliography or research into the literature on a particular topic. We could adapt that and use similar bibliographic retrieval systems, both online computer retrieval systems, but also just sort of working your way through people's references and following them on to locate academics that had done qualitative research on Northern Ireland. So this meant going to the design retrieval mechanisms and then sort of looking at the Irish collections and the libraries and culling through them and looking for qualitative research, which was an efficient way to produce material. In some ways labor intensive, in other ways efficient because it was collected together. It helps also that this information was basically publicly available and that you had the publications that people had generated, so we could access that without having to immediately approach the person that generated it. And also I think we had a perception this required us to sell that academics would understand the idea of a research catalog, since they were qualitative researchers themselves, they would understand what we meant by qualitative research, and would realize, since they had collected this as information, that they still had other use. So the strategy we decided on was not to just send out a round robin sort of questionnaire asking people for information for research. Again, I think certainly every academic here has this experience. Usually about this time of year, for some reason, you'll get some email correspondence from someone round robin saying, we note that you have done research on Northern Ireland. We have a short questionnaire, it's only 6 pages long. Could you possibly fill it in? It's like every other questionnaire you've been approached with over the last 5 years, except ours is a little bit different, so you can't just cut and paste. You'll have to sort of do something unique. And it'll take a lot of time, you'll send it off, and you'll never hear from us again. So how about wasting a couple of hours of your time for us, please? I mean, this is my perception when these things come in, and I tend to file them in the pending pan, and they're at the, you know, and they're in the stack, at the top of the stack, and getting closer to the stack all the time. So I think there was this danger. We realized that if we just did a round robin, that we would probably not get a very good response. People are academics are very cynical about this kind of approach. So what we did was a bit quite different, really. Peter, again, and Mark followed through, where when we identified someone that had either by inference must have qualitative data because of the kind of studies they had generated, or that we knew had qualitative data, we would go to the publications and the material that was available on it and try to produce a catalog entry that was as complete as possible from the published material. So you could use the abstract of the publication to get information about when the research took place, who the subjects were, what form the field work took, and we would produce an entry. And then at that point, and only at that point, would we contact them, where we would say that we explained what the catalog was about, and show them the entry we had generated, and ask them to check it for accuracy. If there were any particular points that we realized that we weren't sure about, or that we could not infer from what had been published, we would hide those particular areas. Could you give us specific information? And again, emphasize this was an ESRC-supported project, that we would need to give a final report at the end, and that it would be something that would be out there, and they wouldn't be wasting their time. And I think this strategy worked very well for us. People would respond. Sometimes they would take a couple of reminders to help them to respond, but they would come, by and large, they'd come back to us. And quite often they would also sort of indicate other pieces of work they had done that we weren't aware of, and perhaps generate spontaneously some additional entries, or lead us on to other people. So by sort of a snowball sort of procedure, we were able to sort of accumulate, cover the academics, I think, hopefully pretty well, though I am sure somebody at the end of this, when we're having lunch, will say to me, what about, and we'll name somebody that we've forgotten. I'm sure, it always happens, but we have tried, we have been quite systematic. Then, as time went on, we shifted more to the non-academic sources. Again, some of these I think were particularly obvious and well-known, such as the BBC, UTV, and Mendenhall. But then the private individuals were a particular sort of interesting source. Like, some of these people we knew about, we just heard about them one way or another. Some had approached Kane or ARK over the years, so that we had sort of a list of people to get in touch with. But then we had the feeling there were probably other people out there as well that we didn't know about, that didn't really have contact with the academic world. So what we eventually did there is had a publicity campaign. There was a round-robin email, mainly to community organizations looking for material, but also letters to the editors of regional papers, and a general sort of promotion through TV and local media outlets. And this produced some interesting responses that came back. Some of these were very useful. We also had some very peculiar responses that came back as well. And there were lots of materials in between. It's very hard to communicate in a 5-minute local radio spot what you mean by qualitative research in a qualitative archive. So you had a good many people who would come back with a few items they had saved. We did pass some of these on to the Ulster Museum or to the Mendenhall Library. which might explain the slightly shorter response we got from the whole library, and they got all these people coming in with assorted bits and pieces. But we at the same time, this also generated some very interesting material that we really didn't know about. It could be of great use to qualitative researchers. So that's a little bit about how we produced the catalog. I think again, sort of being conscious of time, I want to actually give a sort of an online demonstration. So I'm going to roll through, move on, and actually sort of show the site, a bit of the site itself, and I think the technology will work here, so we can get a live demonstration. If you aren't familiar with ARK, we're located at www.ark.ac.uk. And if you want to interrogate our catalog, there's several routes there, but there's sort of two main routes that we have. One is if you go to the top page of ARK, there's a list of what our facilities are offered under Explore ARK. There's one called NIQA, Northern Ireland Qualitative Archive. And if you click on that one, you'll be led to the ageism and the Northern Ireland conflict subsets, and then you can move straight into the conflict archive and go there. Or if you want to go directly, it's just the URL is www.ark.ac.uk/qual/conflict. When you arrive there, you'll discover the catalog, a bit of explanation about it, and there'll be an invitation to do a search. And searches can be done under 4 criteria. I'll show you in a moment. We have, you can do a keyword search on any word or combination of words that's held in the title or the abstract. Similar to if you went to, say, one of the journal bibliographic retrieval sites and put in a combination of keywords looking for a particular title. And you can use and or and put it for a combination of words or exact sets of words there. That's quite useful if you're looking for a particular type of information. Help with that, we also have, we could search by the year. So when we knew it, or if it was feasible, we would sort of give the year that fieldwork took place. So if you're looking for work from the early 70s, you could go directly to their investigators' names. And then we also have a subject list, particular set list of topics, broad topics that again can help speed up a search or refine it. So I think with no further ado, I think I'm now going to try to move into a online demonstration. So just bear with me for a second. Like this. Okay, now we're into ARK. This may be familiar to a lot of you already, the ARK main page. And I could put in the URL straight in, but let's say if you came to the main page you're wondering about, oops. A nice touch sensitive. So if we roll over to NIQA, it takes us into the qualitative archives. And you see there's the archive on ageism, but also the one on conflict. And we have a little bit of explanation that I've been talking about here. And at the moment, we still call it a trial version of the database, but it's very closely approaching a finalized version of the database. So, in effect, now I think we have at the moment about 150 entries. So it's probably moving beyond a trial version and becoming close to being the actual database itself. So you can search the database, go here, and that takes you to a search page. And as I said, 4 ways to search. So let's say, for instance, something I prepared before, as they say in the cookery programs. For instance, let's say that you're interested in a particular set. So let's say we're interested in looking at people who've done research into Protestant identity. So you might go and put in the keyword Protestant. And let's say we want around the time of the millennium. So research that took place including the span of the year 2000. And perhaps you were interested in work of a particular researcher to see what he or she's done. And we have a colleague in my department named Claire Mitchell. So I'm going to ask for work that's been produced by her. And then, because it's Protestant identity, and I know that we have the keyword identity, I can use it that way as well. I could have used it just Protestant identity in the title, but this helps get in. So now let's do a quick search. I don't think so. So, quick. And then you can see what we got as 5 results. And Claire has, in that particular period of time, the year 2000, produced at least, carried out 5 separate produced 5 separate types of data. And so there we have quite, particular material. And let's say they were interested in a particular one. Perhaps the one, Religion, Identity, and Politics in Northern Ireland, produced by Claire in the year 2000, 2001. So I can ask for more. And this is what I get. This is the entry, the complete entry. So I'll what I'll do is I'll quickly sort of go through the kind of material that we have in the catalog. So you've gotten this far, you're wondering if this is something for you. So here we see the title. This was probably the title of the particular project she had there, Religion, Identity, and Politics in Northern Ireland. There she is, Claire. A description, and these have either been generated by the researcher themselves or generated by us, probably using abstracts from articles as the sort of initial source, but using a description of published material that would have been shown to the investigator, and they would have been passed in its completeness. So there we have a short 2-paragraph description. Some are longer, some are shorter than others. Again, I won't read that for you. You can read that so that you can see that it gives you a pretty clear idea of what was carried out. This one did come out of a book. So what we have here is it's been adapted from a book by Claire. The time period of the research was 2000, 2001. Claire Mitchell is the holder, depositor. She had a sponsor, the Irish Council for Humanities and Social Sciences. Subject categories generated. These are our keywords, including, I see, identity, but several others as well. Main topics, a set of words which again will help you in the search. And then publications. At least 2 coming out of this particular piece of research. And then some more detailed information, a number of fields. These fields, we originally adapted them from Qualitative, who maintain an archive of qualitative data at Essex University in the UK. Since we were part of one of their projects and are quite closely linked into them, we maintained their fields. We did have to expand to them a little bit, but we didn't actually just take any fields out. We added in a few fields or put some more information in to make them more useful for our purposes. So when the data dates from, the fieldwork dates, Northern Ireland's a country, geography, in this case it was in Belfast and 2 other towns. Spatial units would be, say, perhaps counties, local council districts or something, but does not apply in this case. Observation units, individuals, couples, groups, and communities. And then the kind of data she had collected. Subnational, because it's Northern Ireland. And then the population, again, this is just to describe, it's somewhat like the idea of a quantitative sort of sample, but the kind of groups she was looking at. So you see church and non-church going Catholics and Protestants, encompassing a range of age, backgrounds, and political preferences. And the time dimensions, you could have, say, something like a longitudinal study. Usually what you have is what we have here, a cross-sectional, otherwise one time study. How did you select people? Additional information, number of cases, 35 interviews, type of data collected. And then, as is often the case, access conditions. Claire is quite willing to have a catalog entry, but she wants to manage the data herself, so the access is restricted by her, not currently available, but her contact details, so you can twist her arm if you want to try. And then languages, copyright, who belongs to, and then a miscellaneous other, because other items would sometimes come up, so we have a way of dealing with them. And so that's the kind of information we have. About 150 cases. There are about 20 outstanding at the moment. We're having one last go to try to get people to sort of respond to us, and then a few that are sort of incomplete information we'll have to make a decision about. So that gives you an idea of the catalog. So where are we now with the project? It is coming to the end of its funded period. Officially, it will end at the end of this month. It won't, in some ways, we have continuity, because ARK is an ongoing enterprise, we don't have the proper continuity that some of the other Quads projects have, because ARK will go on for the foreseeable future. There's a song like that somewhere, but ARK will go on for the foreseeable future. This site will be maintained as part of ARK. We are quite conscious that as time goes by, we don't want to turn it into a historical document. So one thing we intend to do just before we finish off the project is to make it possible for people to self-register themselves. At one point we had toyed about people actually putting in their own entries, but have decided for reasons of quality control and also the difficulty of explaining what some of the sort of more esoteric categories were, that we would not have that. But we are going to have a way that people can sort of submit, if they believe they have qualitative information that they would like to be included in the catalog, they can submit relevant details about it and about how we would get in touch with them. And then periodically we're going to hope to be able to go back to them and sort of reaccumulate and bring the list up to date. Qualitative itself is talking about possibly having another sort of top-up grant to maintain the momentum of the 5 projects into the future, so we may be able to sort of be involved in that as well. Now, at that point, I think I'll sort of end my presentation, and we'll entertain questions from people, and perhaps also people with my colleagues may want to sort of talk about particularly sort of interesting experiences they had in approaching people, or some of the more unusual data sets that we came across. Okay, so.
Is there a particular reason why you decided to go for a catalogue rather than an archive?
In the sense, well, an archive in the sense of actually holding the material ourselves.
Yeah, I've got interview data that could be put up there.
Yeah. Well, mainly resources. That ARK has we have limited office space at the 2 universities, but we don't really have sort of physical facilities to keep material. And what we do have is if people do approach us and want to catalog material, we would help people catalog it or archive it at Qualitative at the University of Essex. It has, I mean, that's part of their mission, is to catalog and qualitative data, so that it's very analogous to what ARK does with quantitative data, where we sort of manage access to quantitative data for Northern Ireland, but the data itself from large-scale surveys is held at the University of Essex, at the UK Data Archive.
Probably just to add to that, Chris, you'd probably be exceptional in that respect, that even in the initial phases of the project we were thinking that there might be, we had the funding there through Quads that we could facilitate this transfer of material that it would be stored at Qualitative at Essex, as Bob was saying, though we didn't have the facilities. But we found in the very early period that an awful lot of people, given the nature of the material, were very reluctant to do that. That there was an awful lot of things that would be very useful there, but for a lot of stuff, whether it was off the record interviews with paramilitaries, RUC officers, whatever it was, that it was very, very sensitive information that people weren't prepared to relinquish totally. And that said, they were very much in favour of the idea of this catalogue, that it was going to be a means to facilitate that people could look up the material, find out who was the holder, but they kept full control over it, and that they could approach the individual who held it and outlined their research project, their reasons for wanting to look at the data, but it reassured people that they would keep control. And so when we did contact individuals, we made that very clear that there was a facility there that if they had material which was at risk, which might be lost, we could help in transferring it to quads. But that we tried to be very sensitive in that and reckon that there's no obligation. It's that the foremost objective was a catalogue to facilitate people to approach holders and to allow for secondary analysis.
Claire Haggart, Falls Community Council. Could you tell us more about the Heathwood collection? You mentioned that. Have I got that right? The Heathwood collection?
Yes. Okay. Martin may want to sort of come in and say a bit about it as well, because this is really one of the original sparks that brought about the application. Peter Heathwood is a man who's injured, a victim of the Troubles himself, and is wheelchair bound. And when he came back from hospital, it was, I think, the day of Bobby Sands' funeral, and he began to record news broadcasts, local news broadcasts, and also any documentaries that are being shown about Northern Ireland. He started then, and really virtually almost without a break has continued to do so up to the present. And in addition to just recording this material, he's kept his own sort of personal index system, both of the subject matters of what he's recorded by the date, and he's got these VHS cassettes. And he approached Kane and Mark McNally about the possibility of preserving this in some way, because it was his own VHS which it generates, and if there was a fire or if he passed on, what would happen to this archive? And there was an original application to get some material to preserve it, which wasn't funded. But then when Quads came along, this particular perception that there probably is other material out there at risk sort of helped motivate us to put this application in. And we have a special part of the grant where we described to the SRC that what was contained within the Heathwood collection, and we're able to get hardware, basically material for copying from VHS to DVD. And this is ongoing and present. On the Kane website, there's an index about the Heathwood collection at present, but a much more detailed index is being transcribed, being typed, and so we will have this DVD collection, which will be lodged with Qualitative, but also held locally, that will be available. Now there will be copyright issues with that because it's broadcast material from BBC and UTV, I think RT as well. But it will be preserved and will be in existence and will be indexed as well, which is important. Martin, do you want to add anything to that? Peter?
As you said, there is a database, a separate database on Kane at the moment, which has it's searchable, so people can go on there, and if they're interested in a particular event or a particular issue, they can search for that through the television programs, and then they could try and track down. If they wanted to view the program itself, they could go to one of the archives that holds the programs. But as you said, with an entire copy is going to be made available for the data.
Any others?
Hi, Jill Strauss, the University of Ulster. I was struck particularly by how you said it won't become something about the past, that it'll continue on. But so what would that look like in this time of transition? And then, will there be any sort of sub-cataloging to distinguish
to sort of post St. Andrews material from
for example,
yeah.
I struggle with the language.
I think in one way, you could, since we have the year of coverage, let's say that if you particularly wanted to say work that had been done, let's say since the year 2005,
That would do it.
you
That's
could
true. That would do it.
you could get to it that way. But we haven't tried to sort of compartmentalize it by period of time, but you can get something about it by the year of time.
That's, I had forgotten about that. That would do it.
Again, I mean, I suppose at some point, maybe Northern Ireland would cease to become, there would be no sort of conflict relevant material whatsoever, but I think we're pretty safe grounds for a bit longer. Yeah. Is that-
Can you give us a sort of taste of some of the lay collections that you've come across that maybe we wouldn't have know about?
Yeah. That's Peter or Mark on it.
Well, as Bob suggested there in the presentation, they were probably the most difficult to access. We started with academics, and then we knew Bob, and then also broke down the lay community in the more established institutions, you're in the whole like Bishop, BBC, and so on. And maybe I'll come back to them because you were probably on about more the individuals beyond those as well. They were the hardest to get through to, and so that's why we had the advertising campaign and so on. But there were individuals out there who it would be mainly kind of photographic collections, video collections, that sort of stuff. But there is some very, very unique stuff. That's it. They were very hard to get through to these individuals to find out that they're out there. And the other thing is we hope that this, in launching this and so on, that this, as Bob was saying, it's an ongoing thing. This might encourage more people to come forward to this, as they do with Kane and other resources and ARK. But the material we did find with those individuals is very, very unique. There was stuff that maybe institutional or the BBC wouldn't get access to. But there's particularly one individual was very much embedded in the Republican community and would have numerous videos of specific events, like hunger strikes and Republican funerals and that kind of things. With clearly had very privileged access in that, so it's material there which is very unique. It's something the BBC wouldn't be able to get through. And even some of the material I saw in that collection was videos of, say, UTV recording an incident in Ardoyne or something. Something this was almost quite postmodern, that you would have a different perspective on what you saw on the news. That there was a film of the camera crew and them maybe showing, rioting and so on, and then they would have the reverse angle of this and showing the huge police presence. So it gives you a different perspective on this particular incident. So I think the point I'm making is there weren't. We'd like to think there was a lot more of these people, but when we did get through to these people, there was very, very unique material there, which some of these people are interested in saying this is our interpretation. It's not what you're going to see in the BBC archives, but it is another perspective on the conflict that we want to be there, whether it's wholly accessible now or in the future, that it's going to be there to contribute to a more rounded narrative of the conflict, which I suppose we are trying to work towards. That answers a bit of what you were saying now.
I suppose we could mention, one collection that came from the lay community would be the Vincent Dargan collection. There are others, but in that collection you'll find things like photographs which were taken by someone who just decided to take the photographs. It was part of his work, of course, as well. But in addition to his work, he took photographs of Orange Marches, photographs of social conditions in Belfast in the 1970s, and this was taken by someone who's just, who decided to do this out of interest. And really, I think, we wouldn't have known about that. Most researchers in the university wouldn't know about that. But now with this catalogue, you have got the opportunity to go and look for this kind of material that's out there that can be used for research.
Well, I should know, but can we search by different types of material? So if we were just interested in photographs, for example, people who have photographic collections, can we search like that?
I think the short answer is no. You can't. I mean, you could possibly use the abstract. You could put in photograph or something, but yeah.
Just on that last few comments made there, do you feel that given the history of the country and especially the Protestant community, that they've been able to articulate the archive, from their community, because Republicans have been way ahead of, say, the Protestant community, basically where they've been doing it, where the Protestant community hasn't been doing it. So are we going to have an archive here that is balanced? Are we going to get basically an archive, not out of your fault, out of the fault of the Protestants themselves, because they've been afraid to come out and speak out. They haven't been doing this in the past. So are we going to have an archive here that actually isn't balanced?
That's an issue. It's come up for sure. I mean, it's certainly in the, particularly probably in the private collections. It's been more from the Catholic community than the Protestant community. And we did in a publicity campaign hope that people from loyalist backgrounds or Protestant backgrounds would come forward. And we have had some come forward, but there definitely is more Republican material that's come in than loyalist material, or whatever words you want to use. Now, I think healing through remembering has helped put some balance in, because there were some particular sites there they could say that could help reintroduce some balance. But if you wanted to sort of sit through and do sort of a head count, I think there would be in the lay material sort of more from the Catholic community.
Can I just add to that, Bob, as well? That's something that we did talk about, and it's something, that worried us, that we weren't getting enough from the Protestant community. But it's a sensitive thing as well. When we didn't get a lot of things through healing, through remembering as much as perhaps we'd liked from the Protestant Unions community, it's a bit difficult, to go out there and insist, and that's something, that we couldn't do, so.
Have you been looking at the stuff that's been appearing on YouTube from loyalist paramilitaries? Because I've been surprised at the amount of stuff they're putting up on YouTube. Videos of loyalist paramilitary shows of strength, one sort or another.
No, it's one of the avenues that certainly up to the period I did it, but I suppose it's really only taken off that YouTube, but it's comments like that we're kind of looking forward to, as well as Bob was saying, that we're not claiming this is going to be a completely definitive project, and although the funding's run out, there's talk of the possibility of extending this and looking at how there's other resources there. And so we very much welcome comments like that there's probably ways that we aren't aware of, that we can't be sure of, and from what you're saying, there is an awful element, particularly from the loyalist community, that's being utilised there. It's something that we'd definitely be interested in taking note of and seeing how we can, whether I'm not too familiar, I know the site you're talking about, I'm not too familiar exactly how it works, but we can look into ways of contacting people that might have that material, and that would certainly help us with the problem that Mark was talking about there.
Yeah, and if I could come back to William as well, if there's other ways that you think we can better reach a whole cross-section of the community, or ways, for example, within ARK, we are very keen to promote and disseminate the resources that we have and that we're developing. If there's ways we can perhaps give seminars about some of the things, or workshops that might interest people and encourage them that this might be useful long-term to preserve this sort of material and acknowledge that it exists, then we'd be more than happy to speak to you or anybody else here or elsewhere who's interested in helping ensure that materials from a cross-section are recorded and held.
Just to get some idea of the scale of this, you said there were approximately 150 entries so far. So the one that you brought up from Claire Mitchell would be one of those 150, is that it?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And you said that the BBC and UTV are included. So would one programme made by the BBC in 1985 be an entry? Or what?
No, we couldn't do that. Actually, UTV and BBC, as far as I left it as well, there were just an individual entry on each of their archives. Both UTV and BBC Community Archives, I think it's called, both have individual entries which give an overview of the vast amount of material that is in each BBC Community Archive. A very underutilised resource. That's the other thing we're trying to do with this, is open this up and make people aware of the great resources that are out there. Even going back to when I was a student, if I'd have known some of the great stuff that you can access through the BBC, just down the road at Culture, whole reams of radio recordings, pretty definitive from the 90s and going right back through the 80s as well, and some even from the 70s. But for each of those, it just didn't make sense that all we could do is give an overview, and that people, at least then it facilitates people to contact the specific person who runs these archives, and then through them they can get a better, more definitive idea of what's going on. They can see their specific research area and find out what's there. But with something like the BBC and YouTube, they're just so big that we just did individual entries. then different from that would be somewhere like Leadenhall Library, where it's such a huge range of information on Northern Ireland, but then not all of it's qualitative. So we did there maybe about 5 entries on Leadenhall Library to try and break that up. So where it made sense to a specific archive, they have very different things. That there'd be the RUC's video collection. Again, not many people will be aware of this great resource. But there was also the NIO donated all their kind of press cut-ins somewhere in the mid-90s. So there's these resources within Leadenhall Library which probably not such a great resource that people don't know about. So where it made sense there, we'd maybe break things down and talk about these specific resources within an archive, but no, with something like the BBC UTV, there was just one specific entry which gives you everything you need to contact the person who deals with that and pursue your own interest through them.
Well, can I ask one more question? In relation to the collections that you found that were outside of Northern Ireland, we had anticipated, given the interest, for example, in America in the Northern Ireland conflict, that there would be a lot of people from there, based there, who might identify worker collections. Did that actually happen in practice, or is it mostly Northern Ireland based lay and academic people whose collections we've got?
The majority is from Northern Ireland, but there is a considerable number of entries from outside as well. Some of which are well known outside researchers, but also things they're PhD students that would be in here that probably, unless you search through dissertation abstracts and then go and look at abstract as a thesis, you wouldn't know about. But in fact, there's sometimes a quite interesting potential.
Also Australia, that was the one that, North America and Australia, there seemed to be a good number of postgraduate students who'd written very interesting stuff which people wouldn't be so familiar with, so there was certainly the more established academics, but there was a number of things which I'd certainly never heard of, and those, I suppose, reflecting the kind of diaspora interest. North America and Australia, as I say, seem to be two sources beyond Britain and Ireland that are really useful.
David Newman, Queen's University. This catalogue will give you the first step. It tells you where everything is.
Yeah.
After this project, it is a future project to yourself or someone else. What needs to be done to make it so that people can actually use this qualitative data for their research? What are the other steps that need to be sorted out? Because this isn't as easy as a video on YouTube or several people working up transcripts or a computer in their own community group. So what would the next steps be to try and make it actually practical and easy for people to reuse and reanalyze?
Well, the next step, I think, would probably, which would be quite an expensive next step, it would be to really go back to these, select some of the perhaps more data, sources of data that have more potential for secondary analysis, and go back to these people and maybe make the case stronger that they should release it or deposit it, and take steps either to help them probably deposit it at the Qualitative site. But that would require a quite large project because it would mean, in many cases it would mean physically helping them catalog the material, put it into shape where it could be passed on. There's one thing we thought about is I won't name the organization, but there's an organization that has a lot of video material that is a great potential research source, but it's utterly chaotic, and it would take probably months of work to because it's in different formats and it's sort of literally sitting in cupboards to rescue this material and digitize it and organize it in such a way that it would be a wonderful resource. But it also be a research project in itself. That sort of material, and then also I think that the other even more expensive. One of we produced a press release yesterday, and I got a lot of interest from local media yesterday evening and this morning, And really what they were wanting, they were hoping that they could go to the ARK site and you could click on a site and then you could click on and you could bring up the transcripts of the interviews or the audio tapes or the list of the photographs you could view on the site. That would be the ideal in the end, I think. But it's, that would be an infinitely expensive project to carry out.
Probably just to add to that, I mean, you are right in saying that it is only the first step, but it is a very, very important first step. And what it does, at least, is it facilitates access to these things. All of the entries have a specific section on the information that say whether the material is open to access now or not, whether the researcher, the author, the holder is open to being approached, and if they are, there's specific contact details there, email addresses or so on. There's very few where people, when we respected the fact, if they didn't want any kind of contact details put in, of course we respected the fact, but most people at least put their contact details, so even if they're saying very clear that access is not allowed at the moment, that this material is too sensitive as it stands, that they're open to being approached, you know, that interested students or documentary filmmakers, journalists, whoever it is, can approach these people who worked with this material and get to know more about it. But I think we're also thinking, and this gets onto the point Bob was making about it, it's not just a historical archive, there's something that's going to be utilised more in the future, we hope, is that as things progress in Northern Ireland, we would like to think that as we continue to move on, that this material, a lot of this data is referring to experiences which are really quite recent for some people, and it's just too sensitive now, but that at some future point, the material, more people will be open to allowing access to this material, that it will be there, records of it is there now to say who's got what, and that the material will be there to contribute to